Well, St. Andrews, I am honored to be able to introduce you to Kaylin and Caitlin Spencer. I've known them for some time, and they live and work in Taipei, Taiwan. And you hopefully have already seen a video that they sent out about their ministry. We're going to sort of follow up on that video today. So you guys have lived in Taiwan for 14, 15 years now. And originally when you went, you didn't plan to be there 14 and 15 years. So tell me what led to you guys, after originally going for just a couple of years, what led to you guys staying and ministering there?
Gonna go for it?
Sure. Um, yeah, so in those early years, TJ was there with us actually, and we were teaching English. And Kaylin and I knew we wanted to do missions long term, but we never planned to stay in Taiwan. However, as we got to know Taiwanese people, we talked to other missionaries here, we realized that there's still a huge need in Taiwan for missionaries, especially among the working class people. Less than 1% are Christians. It's just a really spiritually dark place. And so as we got to know the need more, we thought, well, maybe we should pray about staying here.
Yeah. I think for we got married and then we're thinking about the future. We always had a heart to do ministry for people who have never heard the gospel. And we want to do that overseas. And so when we came to Taiwan, we thought that Taiwan did not have that need. We thought that the church was healthy enough here, or it was impactful enough here that Taiwan was reaching Taiwan. But then after we were here for a few years, we learned that actually Taiwan is still largely unreached and there's a big need. And so as we were kind of thinking about our next steps, people, we were asking other missionaries and kind of asking for advice on future direction. And people just kept saying, why don't you guys stay in Taiwan? You have these connections, you start to know the culture, and there's this huge need. Maybe God's calling you to stay there. And so then through a longer story of circumstances, we felt this is where we're called to stay. And so after about 2 or 3 years, we just made the decision to make this, where we're going to do ministry long term. And that was kind of the transition point.
Yeah. So you began raising support and living there and working there, and eventually God led you to work in an area of Sanchong. Tell me a little bit about that area, how you wound up there, and what ministry looks like in that area.
Do you want to start?
Sure. Well, the first thing Taiwanese people say when we told them we were going to move to Sanchong, or when we tell them now that we live in Sanchong, they go, Sanchong, why would you want to live there? So it has a reputation for being the not so nice area of town. It is a very working class area. There's a lot of factories. There's not really any tourist spots around here. It's just very local. It's also a lower income area. A lot of people who are moving from the poorer southern part of Taiwan to the north to try to get jobs will first live in Sanchong because it's cheaper to live, but still close enough to the big city to commute. So yeah, and the reason we chose Sanchong is we knew all that going into it, but the reason we chose it is because in all of northern Taiwan, it is the place that has the highest number of temples per person, but the lowest number of churches per person.
Mhm.
So with the current number of churches here, one church would have to serve 40,000 people. So we wanted to be part of changing that.
Yeah. Yeah, when you look at Taiwan, almost all the churches are located in the central city, Taipei City Center, where it's more international. There's lots of universities, there's lots of, banks, commerce. And so, with good reason, a lot of churches put resources into those areas. But then what happens is Santong and places like it basically are not on the map. They're like, well, it's not strategic. It's still really expensive to live there. It's really long and hard work. I remember one time I was talking to someone who worked with OMF, and they work in a similar area, and they were like, Kaylin, if you see someone come to Christ over 20 years, that is a success. So basically, it's not as open to the gospel, and it's expensive and hard to live here, and it has a bad reputation. It's not dangerous. Santong is actually very safe, but it just doesn't have, it doesn't have the posh kind of connotations that Taipei City would, and so people aren't inclined to move over here. So it was all because we wanted to work with people who didn't know the gospel and we wanted to plant churches. So that's why we came here.
Yeah. So when you moved there, and began work there. What did that look like? How did you get started? What were the difficulties of working there?
Well, people in Sanchong are very much steeped in traditional Taiwanese religion. So, for example, our neighbors, one day they came over and I was talking to their child, and the wife said, "Oh, her name is not that anymore. Her name is now this other name." And I said, "Oh, why did you change her name? Because she's already like 3 or 4 years old." And she said, "Well, we took her to the temple, and the reason she's been sick a lot is because her old name was unlucky. So the person at the temple gave us this new name to bring her good luck." So that's just an example of how like these superstitions and beliefs really, really impact every part of their life.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
When we first came out here, really what we started doing was just getting to know the culture, getting to know the place. Like we moved out here, it's just us, it's just our family, and I taught English part-time. We were doing outreach, like library story time at the public library. We were doing anything we could do just to meet more people, know the culture better, know the people better. And we did that for a year and a half, just nothing formal, just kind of getting the lay of the land. And then after that, we met through this job. I was working part-time teaching English. We met this couple who lived really close to us, and they were also Christians. And we were like, "Look, you guys don't have a church here. You guys are committed to Taipei City. We used to go to church in Taipei City. We want to start a small group with its sole purpose is to reach out to people in the neighborhood. And would you guys want to be part of the small group with us, like an evangelistic small group?" And they're like, "Yeah, we would love that." So that was like the beginning. Basically, after beginning our year and a half, a year or so, we partnered with them. We started meeting Sunday nights. It was like us and our million kids. And sometimes other than us four, there was no one else. But just slowly through meeting people or, networking or, random evangelism or whatever, we would get people coming one at a time to this small group. And then that was kind of the beginning. So we did that for 2 or 3 years until we finally had a core group of people who were like, "All right, let's make this a church." And then we on Sunday worship. So it was all about meeting people. It's all about getting to know people. It's all about getting to know the culture. Yeah. And that's how.
And as we saw in the video, it has been blessed and it has been fruitful, and that's a wonderful testament to God's grace and your work in that area, and we're really grateful to hear about that. Now, Kaylin, you pastor the church there. You went to seminary there in Taiwan, and you pastored the church. Now, tell me a little bit about who you're working with, and maybe a little bit about the other things you're involved with outside the church there in ministry.
The church itself, it's very local. I mean, we're the only foreigners there. Almost everyone lives in the neighborhood here. And I think almost everyone in our church is also first generation Christian. That's like a term people use in Taiwan. They're like, "I'm the first person in my family to become a Christian." Yeah. So a lot of that kind of dynamic. And so what we do, I mean, it's just the basics, We preach, study the Bible, and we have a small group and equip disciples. So that's what ministry looks like largely. But I think we have our church culture. We really want to, our name in Chinese, it's a play on all these Chinese words and all these things, but it's New Blessing Church. And the idea is like we've been blessed in the gospel. And so now we want to go and be a blessing to others. So our church is really focused on evangelism and outreach, and then developing this healthy culture that is really different than the culture around it. I remember someone once telling me something like, the idea that you could just go to someone and be like, "Hey, when you did that, that really bothered me." And then this person would say, "Oh, thanks for letting me know. Let's like forgive one another and then like come back together." They were like, they had never heard of anything like that before. Yeah. So a lot of our ministry is spent on kind of building that. We call it gospel culture. So that's in the church. But then beyond that, we want our ministry to be impactful for all of Taiwan. So one example is about 6-9 months ago, I got together with some other pastors and ministry leaders, and we launched something called TGA, Taiwan Gospel Alliance. And what we're trying to do through this is build a pipeline or an ecosystem where people can get passionate about ministry, they can be equipped to do ministry, and they can go plant churches. Because our church, no matter how big or successful it is never going to be enough. So we want to be investing in that ministry. That means we do a lot of things coaching other pastors or developing pastoral networks. And then hopefully we're going to see some fruit come out of that pretty soon, actually. So that's one thing we do. And then Kate is also overseeing a pastor's wives ministry. It's called Parakaleo. And maybe you can speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, just in Taiwan, pastors' wives face a lot of expectations and pressure. And so we really want to equip and support pastors' wives to rely on Christ. And then through that gospel renewal, then be able to help create that healthy gospel culture in these churches.
And I want to. So she says, pastors' wives face a lot of challenges. I mean, pastors' wives everywhere face challenges, but in Asia, particularly in Taiwan, one of the interesting things is when a pastor is hired, oftentimes in his contract, he's told that his wife can't work outside another job because she needs to basically be full-time women's ministry director. So like, there's a lot of expectations that I think you need the Bible and you need the gospel to come in and say, all right, what's the Bible really say about this? How do we have healthy families, healthy churches based on what Jesus has done for us? So yeah, that's another exciting thing I think we're working on.
Yeah. Well, that's great. It is encouraging to hear. During Epiphany, of course, one of the main themes for us is God's light shining in darkness. And so it is really encouraging for us to hear about you guys being a part of that and shining God's light in dark places and the fruit that comes from that. And so we're grateful to you guys for doing that work. And we would like to know, we close here, what are some ways that we can be praying for you guys?
Hey, want to start?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you guys for taking the time to get to know us and chat and for praying for us. We really appreciate it. One thing you can be praying for is, so our church, we moved into a space last year, and I mean, praise God, the church has continued to grow a lot since then. And so we're actually looking for bigger space or ways to expand the space because we are already at capacity. So that's definitely something to pray for. Another thing is there's quite a number of people in our church who are seekers. They are very open to Christianity, interested. They come to Bible studies, but they're not quite ready to get baptized or to really commit themselves to Jesus. So just be praying for their hearts that over the next year, God would continue to work and bring them to that point of faith.
Yeah. If I would add one, that's great. If I would add one more, I'd say just pray for like local leaders. So we have great like lay leaders at our church, but ideally I'd like to work myself out of a job. Like ideally I would have local Taiwanese guys taking over or planning churches coming out of our church. And it's just really, it's really hard. Those resources are very, very limited. Yeah. So yeah, we pray for local leaders. Yeah.
Very good. Well, we will be praying for you, and we will look forward to hearing more down the road about how God continues to work through you. So thank you again, and God bless.
Thank you.
Thanks, TJ.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
Bye.